What's up, you lazy, entitled, basement-dwelling millennials, bootstrapping boomers, apathetic Xers, and goddamn Gen Z kids today? Our episode is about Ice Ice Baby, I guess, if we get right down to it. We've got Kate Wegener, a immigration attorney who specializes in minors, if I understand that correctly. And Kate, thank you so much for being here and lending kind of your expertise and inside knowledge to all of us who are just kind of seeing these horrors unfold, and there's a lot of confusing and complicated and conflicting information about what we're getting told and what we're seeing with our own eyes, and very few of us are legal experts in these matters, so it's really nice to have somebody who can kind of help clear us up and tell us, what we are appropriately freaking out about and what we're, inappropriately freaking out about. So, thank you so much for being here, and tell us about yourself, what you do specifically.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being invited to join you. As you mentioned, I'm an immigration attorney. My work has focused on humanitarian relief and specifically working with representing unaccompanied children. Been born and raised in the upper Midwest, but my immigration path actually started in Texas. We moved down there about 10 years ago. And I started getting involved in immigration-related opportunities when Trump was first inaugurated. And then just recently, my husband and I relocated back to Minneapolis.
Well, we're happy to have you back. I'm sure it's nice to be back out of that hellhole down there.
For many reasons, yes.
Were you there? I
Okay.
guess quick side question. Were you there when the grid failed and all that stuff?
Oh,
That
yes.
winter. Wow.
Yes, yeah, it gets really hot there. It also can get very cold there, and the state isn't quite very well equipped to deal with those extreme temperatures. So yeah, we both survived a lot of really hot days, but then also freezing temperatures, broken pipes. I want to say we lost our pool, we lost all of our landscaping. We were really fortunate none of our interior pipes broke, but yeah, we were at times sitting next to our gas fireplace for heat.
Hmm.
So yeah, it was crazy
Yeah.
down there.
So you saw
Sounds very
firsthand
Texas.
that it was just the windmills that were breaking that caused all your problems, right? It was just those
Exactly.
windmills couldn't keep up with the electricity.
That's right.
Ugh.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. Sorry.
No,
Just
no, no. It's all good. It's interesting too because you say that the state's not really equipped, but the state chose to not be equipped for those
That's correct.
situations. I mean, they made conscious decisions to be like, we'll roll the dice on this one, and yeah, and this goes to show us how well conservative policies work. They get a cool breeze, and the entire state goes into a state of emergency. So.
Exactly.
Which,
Exactly.
which from Minnesotans looking down on Texas when they got their 30-degree day and their whole state shut down, and it's like, yeah, I don't know, it's really hard to feel bad for you at this point. Our windmills work just fine when it's 30 below. It seems like a you guys problem down here.
Yep. Yep.
Um, but anyway, so
Absolutely.
so you represent you're an immigration attorney, and as I understand it, you're a private attorney. You don't work for the state, but a lot of your funding comes from the state through nonprofits. Can you explain kind of how that's going?
Sure. Sure.
The
So
current administration really loves funding nonprofits and social services and things that help immigrants.
yeah. So it's a little bit interesting too because like I said, I work for a resettlement nonprofit, um, and during the initial Trump administration, just as a little bit of a history, that is where I started. I started as a volunteer at this immigration nonprofit that focused on resettlement. And during the initial Trump or the first Trump administration, the number of refugees dropped significantly. And we therefore started looking at serving other vulnerable populations. And that's when we started focusing on people here in the United States seeking status. And interesting enough, services were expanding for representation of people who were in need of assistance with removal defense and seeking status here in the United States. So it was during the first Trump administration that we received a grant to start an unaccompanied children's program. And that was funded through our government. It is funding it through the Office of Refugee Resettlement. And for years, Congress has appropriated funds to serve children. And that expanded under the first Trump administration, continued during the Biden administration, and then immediately upon the second Trump administration, funding was cut and terminated in many instances, leaving a tremendous amount of children unrepresented and nonprofits in a really, really difficult situation because, of course, in the legal world, once you start representation, you can't suddenly terminate it, even if your funding is terminated.
That's tragic.
So what you're saying is that
that's what
right. Yeah. So what you're saying is that the Trump administration helped at least solve this problem initially, and then just stopped the funding and caused a bigger problem.
Sure. Yeah, and it was. I mean, the funding came from Congress. So when
Sure.
I say during the first Trump administration, I'm not sure how much Trump really played a role in that, or knew that
Right.
that was that there
not
was.
so doling
Trump-
out credit for.
Trump doesn't really.
Exactly.
The Trump
But-
administration doesn't really seem to care where the funding is supposed to come from or who's supposed to
Right.
allocate it and what. So that's
Right.
That's fair.
Exactly. But then, yes, we had growth in different, even private attorneys, nonprofits, different organizations who, built up a robust system, a robust staffing to serve children. And we had lots of children. And our program actually started with representing detained kids. So children who, because they had no parent or guardian, all children that are unaccompanied start out in, once they enter the border, they are identified as unaccompanied and they move from Custom and Border Patrol, which is overseen by the Department of Homeland Security, to the Office of Refugee Resettlement, which is overseen by the Department of Health and Human Services. And they end up in shelters. They could end up in long-term foster care. They can end up reunified with a sponsor. But our initial work was with kids who are in shelters or in long-term foster care, and also a URM program for unaccompanied refugee minors, which is actually a released program. But yeah, there were a lot of organizations that served kids, and primarily when they were still in detention, they have no parent, no adult, no one to really help them through the legal services or the legal system. You had all these organizations, and then not only was the funding terminated, but then there was also, I believe, within weeks of that proclamation that the kids that were in custody would be expedited and required to go to court much, much sooner, and now completely unrepresented.
All right, I'm not gonna touch on that right now because we're gonna talk about that all at the end. It's mind blowing to me. I mean, absolutely disgusting. But before we get really nailed down into that, I want to talk about the immigration nightmare we've kind of got going on in the country as a whole, and get your thoughts on that, because this has gone beyond just deporting the illegals as they tried to pretend it was, which is bad enough as it is. Most of these people are hardworking, law-abiding members of our communities that are integral parts of our communities, and they just happen to, been born in the wrong place. And I mean, first of all, I just want to go have you kind of speak to this, because I've spoke to this many, many times, but I'm only rudimentarily familiar with it. But there are always all these people who are all in favor of, deporting the illegals, so to speak, or I have no problem with immigration. They just need to come here the right way, the legal way, yada, yada. And I don't think these people understand just how next to impossible it is to get here, legally through any type of predetermined passage that is a legal avenue. And can you just explain kind of how that is, how difficult that is, how long that can take, how much money it can take to do that for people who, and how much knowledge you need to have of a legal system you're not a part of, that's written in a language you don't understand, and things like that. Can you just kind of go over that and give people a picture of how hard it is to legally come here in the
Sure.
way that they think that these people should?
Sure. And there are lots of ways to immigrate. There's, we can you can immigrate for job purposes. You can immigrate through family petitions, and in fact, in the last s- several decades, the focus on immigration has been family based, bringing people here to reunite with family, to rather than employment based. It was family based. But yes, it has become so difficult. When I worked in the refugee end of things, and we had individuals who, if you wanted to immigrate through a family petition from Mexico, you would never be able to come through the initial petition. Like if somebody was petitioning for their parent, or even a potentially a spouse, depending upon what their position was, or their status was. You were not thinking that the person you were petitioning for was actually going to ever come. It would be a derivative. It would be it would be the child. It would be somebody who might not even have been born, but they would be kind of inheriting the original petition, because it took so many years in order to come
Mm.
here. And that's because we limit the number of visas that we make available from different countries. So if we top out on the number of visas that are available for a Mexican to come to the United States, year after year after year, there becomes this backlog. And so in order once you have an approved petition, you have to wait for a visa to become available. And that can take so many, many, many years that it just takes decades for somebody to legally enter the United States. And the other thing is that humanitarian entry is not against the law. This is international, that people can seek safety in another country, that coming to the United States to avoid persecution is part of the very fabric of society. So just
What's written
knowing
on the
that,
Statue of Liberty?
yeah, exactly, exactly. And that to call somebody illegal for coming and seeking humanitarian relief is not an illegal act. And the other thing that I think is important for people to remember is that migration is natural. That is how, as a human race, we have survived throughout the ages, is that when things are really bad where you live, you move. It's just now we have these borders and governments, and it's not as easy to migrate, but that is a natural process. So I think that's something that people forget too, and that is how our country was created. People migrated for safety, for a better life, for
Work
because we're
opportunities. Yeah.
work opportunities, exactly. So I think too, people need to just understand that backdrop before they start picking out, ooh, who's coming into our country, into my neighborhood, and just kind of understand that and then the other thing that we have talked about in my cohort is just we are all members of the human race, and there are certain rights that we are all entitled to, and the entitled, to feel that one person is not entitled to safety, to have their basic needs met simply because they were born on the other side of an imaginary line, is is just not. It's just a narrow way of looking at it, to think that we are more deserving than somebody else merely because of where they were born.
Well, it's
Yeah,
not a
that's
human way of looking. Oh yeah, go ahead, Taylor.
no. It's always interesting to me when I don't talk about religion too often in my personal life because I consider myself an atheist and I just generally don't like talking about it in general. But I do have family members who like pretty proudly call themselves Christian and like say we're always Christian values, and then vote for somebody like Trump or a Republican candidate who clearly does not display or have his administration continue any sort of Christian values, especially in this arena. It is pretty tough to take that person seriously when they're talking about issues like this. So.
But Jesus chose Trump. They told us that Jesus told that he just uses imperfect people to do perfect things, like, deport kids with cancer. That's what Jesus's mission is about. And sometimes you just got to have the womanizing 3-time divorced, adjudicated rapist and convicted felon to get that job done.
It was really unbelievable.
No, I think that this is interesting too. I think that we don't put enough emphasis on, every time people move around the country too. That's migration. That's immigration. Even though you're within your same country, if you're going from a state you don't like to another state or a state that's got a better job opportunity or better healthcare options for you or something like that, what you're doing is functionally no different, aside from the fact that you're staying within the borders of a nation, is functionally no different than what these people are trying to do. They're just moving to a place that has a better opportunity for them, and it's the best decision, hopefully, for their family. And, it makes me so frustrated when you hear all these, like, boomers in Florida who have moved down there, for retirement because they want the things that Florida has. They don't want to pay taxes on their income now, and they want to have, a warm place to die. And it's like, why do you think that that's different than somebody who's coming up here who's just looking for an opportunity that's better for them, and they're down there bitching about it the whole time? So I don't understand like why they think that one imaginary line, because it's a nation versus a state line, is somehow different.
And also, I think that we forget how much we contribute to the conditions in some of our Central American neighbors when it comes to climate change and even political violence. The situations that are we have played a very large part in the conditions that people are living with in some of these foreign countries, and we are the reason why they're having to leave. I mean, it's hard. It is hard to pack up and leave your country, to leave your family, and people do it out of necessity, not because, it's an easy journey and it's easy to resettle in a foreign country where you don't necessarily speak the language. You have no community,
you have no understanding of the society. Absolutely. And that's, I don't know, it makes me so frustrated that people just view these people who have, again, they've risked their lives and left everything they've ever known and everybody they've ever known to try to come, and it's like, what do you think that they're going to do when they get here? And that's the other thing is, all the criminals, because they're sending their worst, supposedly. And statistically, we know that's bullshit. Undocumented immigrants are the most law-abiding residents within our country. And it makes sense if you just take, like, a half a second of critical thinking. And it's like, if you could be just booted for any reason after you did everything you could do to get here, you're not going to draw attention to yourself by committing crimes and doing, dumb stuff. You're going to obey every stop sign and traffic light and use your turn signal at every turn, and you're not going to go around robbing people. And, like, these are the people that we want. They're just here to be a productive member of our society and hopefully have a little bit of better life and opportunity in return. And so, I get so frustrated when people treat, these humans that way.
Right. And let's face it, and I'm the first to admit, there's a lot of crime, because I'm talking with the kids that were survivors and left to come here. But they're escaping perpetrators who get away with things with impunity, that are have infiltrated the government. They're not looking to come here to commit crime because they're getting it all. I mean, they can do that in some of these countries where there's no protection against them. So
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, if you just look at the recent election within the last couple of years of the political violence within the Central America, and that's sort of somewhat of the most like blatant violence you can do is political violence and targeting political officials or people running for office. And if that is so prevalent, which it appears to be extremely prevalent in recent elections, just think about the crime that isn't visible, the crime, the organized crime and or just like violent crime that people experience, average people experience, you know. So like you can see, if you think about it, like what's actually happening to these people that's causing them to want to leave where, you know, their homes, their ancestry, to go somewhere new. Like it doesn't take that much thought. And something that we do on the podcast all the time is study history. I mean, you don't even have to go, you could just look at that, or you could go all the way back to the early 1900s and the 60s and Reagan, destabilizing, you know, Guatemala, and just like, it's, the list is endless. The list is never ending, and it goes back as long as America's been a country. We've been destabilizing the regions to serve our interests and not the locality's interests. And to just throw up our hands and say, oh, well, they don't deserve to be here it's cruel, really.
yes.
I mean, we have the term banana republic comes from us overthrowing Central American governments because they weren't going to allow American businesses to have a monopoly on the banana trades in their country. And we're like, yeah, no, you know what? I know you're an elected person who your people wanted, but since you're not going to do that, we are literally going to send in the Marines and destabilize your government and just topple you and put in a dictator who does mostly the things that we say, and they're going to be horrible for you, and do some really, really nasty stuff, and then we're going to treat you like shit when you try to leave that country and come here after we did that to you. And I mean, we've done it all over the world. It's our favorite pastime as America. It's like we just love destabilizing countries, you know, bringing them democracy and freedom by giving them a dictator and lots of bombs. But I guess moving on from that, there's been a huge shift. Deporting people is not new to America. We've been doing this for a long time. You know, we've all been critical of Obama. We called him the deporter in chief. Because he oversaw a record number of deportations during his tenure. But it was different. In a lot of ways, the policies and the way they were enforced was, I don't want to call it humane, but it was certainly more humane than what is happening now. It was certainly more targeted. It was designed in more ways to keep families together instead of tearing them apart the way that it seems like it's going now. And it still followed legal precedent, it seemed, at least from the outside looking in, that there was legal ways to deport people, there was due process involved. And now, I mean, we see visas, like student visas, work visas, things that people have came here legally. They are here legally. They are doing the things the legal way, you know, the legal immigration that everybody claims they're okay with as long as you do that. They're revoking these visas. They're deporting legal residents. Obviously, we've seen that happen repeatedly. And even citizens. I mean, citizens have been deported at this point, which is bonkers. And in addition to that, they're denying people entry based on memes on their phone or text messages where they've been critical of, you know, our dear leader, because free speech is a thing here, I was told once. And how is this legal? Like, how is this happening?
There's a lot of things that are happening that are being litigated in the courts because they're not legal. We certainly, I mean, we have a president who is acknowledging that he shouldn't be doing things under the Constitution, but he's challenging it and saying, I'm going to change the Constitution. So we are in the midst of a constitutional crisis. He also, one thing that a lot of people don't understand is that during the Obama administration, there were a lot of judicial seats that that remained empty, that he was blocked from filling. Then during the first administration, a lot of judicial seats were filled by the Trump administration with his people. And in addition, especially in the immigration world, there were a lot of judges who had directives that they didn't agree with, and they retired and were filled by Trump appointees. So that's a little bit of the backdrop, is we have a court system. I mean, this has been a process that has been years in the making of being able to infiltrate our judicial system, our legislative branch, and our executive branch, so that we are in a time where, he's getting away with a lot of things. And this isn't just something that, he issued an executive order. The first time around, he would issue them and they were found unconstitutional. He couldn't move forward. He wasn't putting people in place using the proper procedures. But there's been a lot more thought put into it this time around. And so, he's able to do more. Some of it is constitutional, some of it is not. Also, the executive branch is the branch of government that has control over our borders and over immigration policies. So our executive branch does have a lot of power there. How they want to enforce laws and even the statutes that are legal. He does have a lot of discretion. Certainly, though, what we're seeing now, where people are being detained and moved around without anyone, there's no transparency there. The fact that a process called expedited removal, which historically has been within 100 miles of the border, if a person was picked up after 2 weeks of entry, they could be deported, so that people who came to the border could not demonstrate that they had fear of return. They could be deported immediately. That term has been expanded so that anybody here in the United States who can't prove that they've been here for more than 2 years can be removed under this expedited removal provision. And not only that, if you enter and you are issued a notice to appear, so you either come through a port of entry or you encounter immigration officials, and they give you something called a notice of appear, which gives you access to the court system to go before a judge to present your case. Anybody who has a notice of appear is not subject to expedited removal. What is happening now is the directive by the Department of Homeland Security is these people come to their first court hearing. And rather than being able to get ready to prepare their case, if they have an attorney or not, the government is moving to dismiss their case so that when they walk out of the courtroom, ICE is waiting for them to deport them because they no longer have a case in front of they've been here for less than 2 years. And they're subjected to expedited removal and they can't go before a court anymore. So people who are, like you mentioned, people who are trying to follow the rules, are trying to do everything according to what is expected of them when they're being punished by doing that. They're being picked up and deported. They're being they can't go home to their children because they show up for court like they are required to do.
It's horrifying. I mean, honestly, and I know you're saying that the executive branch has authority to do a lot of the stuff that they're doing because they have jurisdiction over immigration. but there's also constitutional protections to everybody within the borders of the United States of America, regardless of if you are a citizen, regardless of how you got here. And it seems, I mean, like due process, we're all entitled to due process. Uh, that that doesn't say to citizens. That says to every person.
Correct.
And it seems like a lot of people are being denied that due process. And the executive branch does not have the authority to just be like overruling the Constitution. I mean,
Right.
that's the foundational document that supposedly every branch of government is supposed to adhere to, regardless of what authority they do or don't have.
Yeah.
And so you
And I think
mentioned that a lot of this just sort of the reinterpreting of rules, right, is essentially what the Trump administration is doing. A lot of the stuff is in litigation. Do you know of, obviously, if you don't work in the case, you probably don't know the ins and outs, but how much of this is still in flux, and how much, because I know like the Supreme Court has made a fair number of rulings on a few things that are related to immigration, but I don't think I've seen really much said about sort of this changing of the level of due process that people are be able to receive. I haven't seen anything on that yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because I think what happens is it starts going through the court, and at first they're looking at procedure. And so you're
Mm-hmm.
getting rulings based on, okay, you know, do you have standing to bring this issue?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have, just the process of getting there?
Sure.
Does a district court have the right to create an injunction that affects the entire country, or is it just the state? And so
Right.
that's what's coming through first, before we even get to the legality of what is actually happening. So it unfortunately is a process and takes a while, and under this Supreme Court, the things that we thought would be so open and shut, so clear, are not. And that is truly
Mm-hmm.
what's scary, is that Trump is able to get away with a lot. Some of the previous Supreme Court holdings give him a lot more authority than what I ever imagined would be acceptable.
I mean, speaking of that, like Scotus and nationwide injunctions, Scotus is basically now allowing Trump to end birthright citizenship, at least in some places in the country for the time being, and just
Right.
like first off, what the fuck? Like how I guess I don't I am no legal scholar or legal mind, but like a federal judge does federal things. I would assume, right? That's why they're a federal judge in a federal court, and federal means nationwide. And so, like, if they issued a federal injunction, that should be applied federally. And now the Supreme Court's just like, nah, it doesn't matter if it's blatantly unconstitutional. It just only applies to the state that it was filed in, the
Yeah.
judge ruled
So
in. I'm
basically,
interpreting that correctly. I'm
yeah,
not.
a child
I,
born in Minneapolis or in Minnesota may be a U.S. citizen, but a child born in Texas may not.
that, and I mean, and there's no room for interpretation on this one. Like the Constitution's pretty fucking clear. Like this isn't one of those. Oh, what did the found? Well, it's not a founders thing, but what did they
Right.
mean when they
It
wrote this
was
into the
intentional.
Constitution and stuff like that? Like it's pretty cut and dry on this one, and then so the ramifications of this is what you were just explaining is that now in theory every state could file a lawsuit, get an injunction individually, and stop in theory if the Trump administration just decides to not abide by court rulings, which they have a habit of doing, it seems like as well. But in
Correct.
theory, under this current legal interpretation that the Supreme Court put out, you could still get injunctions nationwide. You just have to do it either through class action suit, as I understand it, or go state by state, and every state would have to sue and get that injunction from a judge in that state. But that takes time and
Yeah.
money and people
Well, and the
and
willingness of the state to do it. And I foresee a potential red and blue type state laws sort of
Hmm.
taking into effect.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then we have the problem that the courts can issue injunctions and orders, and simply the Trump administration ignores it, and there's no repercussion to that.
Uh,
I mean, we've seen that.
And Scotus has basically said that, well, this regime should follow the Constitution. They have no authority to actually force him to do so, is basically kind of the gist I've gotten from their statement, which is insane. Like that's their only job, is making sure that the other branches of government follow the Constitution, right? They're like, this is or is not constitutional, and then you are or are not allowed to do that. Is the only reason they exist. Am I wrong? Like that's the whole point of the federal court system?
Yeah, I mean, they interpret the law, and then how it's supposed to work is that, so Congress creates laws, the courts interpret the law, and the executive branch enforces the law. So, but we don't have three functioning independent branches anymore, and that is truly where this is. I mean, getting off immigration, but just the concerns that are occurring in our country right now in our democracy, is we are running differently than we ever have. We don't have our three branches of government keeping the executive branch in check.
So, right, or how do you see this being fought then going forward? Because I mean, in theory, even if a state puts an injunction on it, the way that this ruling came down, Trump could just decide to write an executive order that says I don't have to abide by injunctions that states that put injunctions on me have put those injunctions on, and until they get an injunction against that executive order saying that he can ignore those injunctions, he could in theory ignore those injunctions. Am I wrong? Like there's really no end to this rabbit hole of what he's allowed to do after this ruling. There's no brakes on that train, if I'm interpreting that correctly. Your
Yeah,
silence is deafening here.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I have this conversation with clients of, well, these are the protections that are out there, but then to say, but I can't guarantee that that's going to protect you. I can't guarantee that the law is going to be followed and that you're safe. We're talking about this on a high level, but then when it comes down to an individual level, it's the same thing.
Well, and so
A party
I
of
guess
law and order, folks.
yeah,
Holy cow.
do you? It doesn't really seem like you have any confident uh, image of how this will be fought effectively at this point, then, or do you?
Um, I have hope that things will change. I have hope that voices are going to be heard, that people will, we are going to hit a point where people say we will lose our democracy if we continue down this path, and that eventually it's going to stop. So I don't want to be completely gloom and doom that that we can't stop the president. I think that
Oh, I mean, there's always further steps we can go. It's just unfortunately, it seems like the legal and the peaceful steps are being removed and eliminated kind of systematically, and it's only leaving things that none of us really want to suggest. But eventually, it will get violent, unfortunately, unless there's some sort of law and order and structure where the people's voices are heard and people have protection from their government. And I guess we're all hoping that we can find an avenue that is going to be effective that doesn't involve, violence. And it's seeming more and more unlikely, especially with this new Supreme Court ruling that basically sets the stage, if we're being honest, for another civil war, because that would set states that have the Civil War, fought over slavery and what states were allowed to do that and not do that. is kind of where we're back at this point. Certain states have fundamental human rights that other states may not have through this ruling, and that sets some pretty hard geographic lines of opposition there. And as Lincoln said, a nation divided cannot stand, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess go
Well,
ahead.
I guess yeah. To me, it seems like unfortunately, the most effective way to combat the Trump administration would be Congress. And we don't really have a say in what Congress will be doing for another year and 6 months or so. So unfortunately, it seems like basically until then, 2026, we're at the hands of the current Congress, which is essentially being puppeteered by the MAGA movement and the Trump administration. So for now, it seems like it's the Wild West a little bit until and if at all the Supreme Court and or court systems work through some of these constitutional dilemmas that are being sidestepped currently, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, no doubt it's going to take time. And it is going to take politicians, courage with politicians. They're going to have to start listening to people. I'm hopeful that we'd see a change before elections, because if people here make their voices heard, people who want to stay elected, if they know what their constituents want, even in conservative locations, if people are saying enough is enough, that we'll start to see some protection, some changes, some law and order reinstated. But yeah, it's in a scary time.
It's tough because I hear what you're saying, and like hopefully we see some people who were potentially moderate that voted for Trump this time around and see some of this and like are completely against some of unconstitutional nature of the way that they're going about things, and then would not vote and would at least put pressure on their representatives, but that seems unlikely. But at minimum, vote against a Republican candidate in 2026. But on the other hand, you might have people who do like what's happening and
Yes.
do feel emboldened that this is the way that we are potentially moving towards. And you might get more of those people coming out to vote for these type of policies. So I on both sides, I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think that that's a both sides thing. I think that everybody who wanted to see this
I don't think
they're as fully represented as they will ever be in this country, and I think voted in as full force as they will ever vote in the most recent election. I think the problem is voter turnout on people who find this appalling was just sadly too low. They didn't take these threats seriously, regardless of how many hours we spent here trying to warn them that this was the eventual outcome if they didn't get off their ass and get to the polls and vote. But I think
Friday 2025
in real time. Yeah,
it's like there's like a tracker online, I guess, and it's like 60% of it's already in process, and we're 6 months into his presidency on a 4-year term, and they've already started almost 2/3 of the exact initiatives from that document. So,
I'll be honest with you, as an immigration attorney, one of the hardest things that I really had to come to terms with after the election is maybe as a country, we for how long were we, this superpower that protected the vulnerable of the world, and I don't think that's who our country wants to be anymore, based on the election, and I don't know what to do about that.
Yeah, I mean, at least we portrayed that, if that's what we would say to the world, if not in some of our militarized actions and other things. But right, we
what
had
we at least wanted to believe about ourselves and what we
Right.
told ourselves, and
Yeah.
now it's kind of like we've
Right.
even given up on any semblance of believing that that's who we are. You know, that idea of American exceptionalism and
right the liberal
spreaders
world
of
order,
freedom and
right?
democracy. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And now we're like, um, I guess we're getting a little politically philosophical here at the moment, and out of your area of expertise. So let's bring it back. You know, ICE, which is really starting to feel like the modern day Gestapo, is kidnapping, human trafficking people. It's kind of become clear from the outside looking in that they're just abducting people off the streets, but there's a lot of confusion as to are they really ICE? They're not identifying themselves, they're covering their faces. Um,
They
how
have
is
no
that
badge
allowed
numbers
to?
identifying
Yeah, no badge
anything.
numbers. Um, how is this allowed to happen? I mean, it seems again, this goes back to due process, and I feel like knowing that the person who is abducting you is a government official, you know, that is doing something by some sort of procedure, and you have some sort of uh, recourse or action you can take to protect your rights, seems to be completely done away with. And again, I mean, aside from just the fact that they're ignoring, you know, all laws and precedent that we thought were written in stone. Um, I guess what do people have as actions to protect themselves from ICE or people pretending to be ICE at this point? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple things. First of all, understanding that the federal government is, they have this huge agenda of mass deportation and they don't have the staffing to do it. So they are trying to create agreements with local law enforcement so that it's no longer just ICE that you're looking, that is coming in and stopping people or detaining them. That now it is local law enforcement. It's the FBI. It's in fact, I've got kids whose social workers are now doing wellness checks that are asking very invasive questions of, family, who they're living with, what their, status is, things like that. We've got this broad spectrum of people and people who aren't trained, who don't. I mean, these agreements that the government is making with local law enforcement, they don't come in and explain immigration law. So we do have a lot of people involved now without a lot of oversight. So yeah, it varies from a police officer who you're getting pulled over for a supposed traffic violation to, more in some areas where they don't have any training, and you've got somebody who thinks that they've got some power over somebody else and they're treating them poorly. But so we have a lot of that. We have a lot of in the administration admittedly is trying to terrorize people, right? Trying to
It's a
it's
deterrent,
hard.
right?
Exactly. And as a result, we have people who aren't going to school, aren't going to work because they are too afraid to be outside of their house. There is a very large push of know your rights to immigrants, to tell them you do not need to speak to somebody asking you about your name, your status,
yeah.
any detailed information. You have the right not to allow somebody into your house. The really frightening thing is ICE deploys lots of tactics to get into people's house, posing as pizza delivery, coming to a
What?
person's house and saying we have a warrant when the warrant is an administrative warrant. There's in that people are supposed to understand the difference between a judicial warrant and administrative immigrant warrant. The fact that they can come into schools now, come into places of worship, come into hospitals and interrogate people. That is all stuff that our administration is doing now. And so, yeah, it's really, really hard for these people to know how to keep themselves safe. And even as an attorney, we have guidance. If we are with a client and they are stopped by ICE, there's nothing we can do because ICE has the authority to detain a person.
I've seen a bunch of videos online of people in courthouses with their lawyers advising them as they're being taken away, and the lawyers just like don't say anything, and
Don't say
they have to let
anything.
them go.
Right, right, because they have the authority to do that. And the Trump administration has broadened that authority by giving federal immigration tasks to local law enforcement and trying to force those agreements with monetary promises or refusing to fund certain projects if they don't create those agreements.
Right. I think he's threatened to withhold FEMA funding from states that call themselves sanctuary or cities and states
Correct.
that like Minnesota's targeted for sure. I think part of the reason why, Trump didn't reach out during the recent political violence in Minnesota is because of Tim Walls's just stance on the immigration practices, and
Mhm.
rightfully so. I mean, obviously on Tim Walls's part, but um, it's crazy that a president is wielding congressional funding to persuade and coerce states that have supposedly state rights. That whole argument.
Where's all the states' rights crowds now? Get real
Right.
silent when it comes to this stuff.
Exactly.
I don't know. I think Minnesota. There's 10 of us states and 8 of us are blue that pay pretty much all of the federal government's bills. So we could. I'm with Gavin on this one. We'll just we should stop or organize the states and be like, you want to withhold funding? Well, we're not fucking paying you then. Like that's kind of the agreement. You won't have any
Yeah.
funding to withhold if we don't give you the money in the first place. So
Right.
Yeah, and
I
that's the beginning of the Civil War right there. Like that's I think that's the spark is the funding aspect is once you have these laws that are dividing us so starkly between some of these state lines, and then you have states that are refusing to essentially give in, and you start that funding battle. I think I don't know that's I feel like that's never happened before. That states have refused to like send over. I don't even know how that works. If it's like
I don't
a
either
just a
because you pay.
passive like just a federal tax that's just like on every transaction that occurs in an economy, and then that just ends up going. I doubt it's like a pay your taxes at the end of a year sort of thing like people do. So I don't know how
I mean,
exactly you get
businesses
around that.
businesses pay their taxes. I mean, it's all paid individually. I don't know. It would definitely be a difficult thing to. The government would basically have to say that we are protecting every citizen who refuses to pay federal taxes this year,
Hmm.
um, and have to offer protections to them to not pay those federal taxes because I don't think the state actually has the mechanisms in place to stop that funding going from person to the federal government. But I don't know exactly how it would look. I just know that all of the people
Yeah.
and all of the money comes from 10 states and 8 of them are very blue. Uh, but moving on to the whole point about ICE doing all of the stuff, having there's just no transparency about how all of these things are happening. With this process, we don't seem to know where any of these people are going, at least from the outside looking in. It's just like they're thrown in, windowless vans and taken to God knows where, and then a lot of times we never hear from them again. It's hard to keep track of them. The government has already admittedly just lost people. They don't know where they are. It takes them a long time to find people when the courts say like you need to bring this person back to the country or give this person some sort of due process. And then there's been rumors, I guess. I haven't been able to actually verify it, but there's some uncomfortable rumors going around that people are potentially being thrown out of cargo planes into the middle of the ocean. I mean, we've seen shackled people washing up on shore. I don't know if you've heard about this or not.
I have not. I mean, I'm just appalled by the things we do hear about of deporting people to third countries where,
Hmm.
but I had not heard about actually eliminating people.
Yeah, there's been, and again, like I can't say for certain, but it would seem, people shackled at the wrists and ankles, wrist waist shackles and ankle shackles, and we've seen people in those types of shackling being marched onto cargo planes that have rear cargo doors that can open in flight. And so there was rumors going around that they were just dumping them out in the middle of the ocean, not actually delivering them to wherever they were supposed to be going. And granted, there's been no like official evidence, but now a couple news stories have popped up of these people or people in those types of shackles washing up on shore, and that's enough to at least be concerning at this point and alarming in any way. And again, there's not a whole lot of transparency to identify these people, see if those are people who came from our country and that's how they ended up there, or how they ended up there in any way, shape, or form. And because these people are, undocumented in many cases, it's very easy to just make them disappear. And it, it seems like a nightmare worst case scenario from the outside looking in. And is there is it that lack of transparency even on the inside as far as trying to keep track of where these people go? Is it that difficult even from somebody with your resources and position?
Absolutely. I will say, there's there's a ICE locator where you can try to find people. Oftentimes they are listed to be someplace when a family member then either calls or goes there. They're like, nope, they're not here anymore. Certainly, I know of cases where family members have been, you know, listed as being in our facility, but then when they actually are in a U.S. facility, when they actually follow through and talk to someone, that person's been deported, but there's no record of that person actually entering the country that they've been deported to. So yeah, that's going on a lot. That's definitely going on, and I don't know why it's not being covered. Other than I don't know how much people care about undocumented people here. We hear stories here and there, but I don't have a vast number of clients and connections but I know when I know of cases that's a very small sampling, and it's happening even in these small samplings.
That is that is absolutely horrifying, and it's scary when you say that you don't know how many people care. And I do think that is that complacency of, oh, it's not happening to me, so it's not my problem, is is true. And I think people are getting more caught up with it and caring and paying attention a little more as time goes on, and it becomes more blatant and more in our faces on our streets in our communities that we're seeing this happen. Um, but what people need to realize, it's what people need to realize is that if it's happening to them right now, it's happening to you tomorrow. And that's what's horrifying. And we've seen this all play out in history already, and it's scary. I don't know what I was expecting, but I guess I was kind of hoping to hear from somebody who works within the system and like, yeah, it's bad, but there is like we can track all of these people and we can keep up with it, and it's not as bad as it seems from the outside looking in, and that's not the vibe
No,
I'm getting here.
no. I think anybody working in the immigration world is just we day to day the things that are going on that we just can't believe.
I,
I'm sorry.
I don't know.
I
Yeah,
didn't
Yeah,
want
no, I
yeah,
to
mean
come
it's
on
not
and
it's
be
not.
be a downer, but I think people need to know that this isn't just picking up criminals and making our country safer by deporting those terrible people who have come. This is definitely impacting families. This is impacting communities, impacting schools. There's a whole list of things that I could talk about, but um, this isn't just a problem that is being solved by, like I said, the narrative is these are criminals. We're just trying to clean up our country by getting rid of the bad
Yeah,
seeds.
and I understand the narrative, and I understand how pre-election, pre any of this stuff actually happening, people, dumb, very dumb people, could have believed that. But now we're seeing firsthand. I mean, they're not the freeloaders because ICE keeps going to people's work. They're not the illegals who are trying to skirt the system because ICE is going to their court cases and picking them up. ICE is going to all the places to pick up the people, and it's the Martin Niemöller poem all over again. First
Yes,
they
it
came,
is.
and we are at that. Like this is the exact same thing that Hitler and Nazi Germany did with the Jews and the gypsies and the disabled people. It's like these people are
Is
the bad people in society, and we are just removing those people to keep our society safe because they're out to get you. They're out to take your job. They're out to, steal your daughters and your children, and they're the rapists and the criminals. And then again, they came for them, and then eventually they came for me is the whole thing. And I'm hoping that people are starting to stand up and see it, but it's horrifying and it's really hard to acknowledge, even though I'm seeing it all myself and I understand the history of seeing this happen before and know it can happen, to just acknowledge that this is happening in real time. Like, this isn't coming, it is here. Authoritarianism is here. This is a constitutional crisis that is here. We are in the midst of something that is going very badly and is going to get a lot worse and a lot more uncomfortable. And if we don't stand up, it's not going to get better. And I naively was hoping that there would be some sort of comfort coming from somebody who's working within the system. But I knew in my soul that wasn't going to be the case. But I was hoping. I'm always trying to be optimistic.
Yeah,
Uh,
we find ourselves in a position to wish ourselves wrong more often than not. Recently, it seems that the things that we were saying were going to happen wouldn't actually happen, and that things would not be as bad as we thought they would be. But it seems like somebody's imagination was more creative than ours, and not in a good way.
before Trump took office, we spoke with our clients and we said, one of the most important things you do, there are going to be so many rumors. Talk to us so that you know what's really going on. And the expectation was they were going to be hearing, fearful things that weren't true. And what has actually happened is that when they come to us and we say to them, let me look into it, and we think this can't possibly be true, it is true. It is so much worse than we imagined, because we thought, hey, we've been through this once, we'll get through it. These first several months have not been like the first time. I do have hope that there will be something that turns around, but right now, we are definitely living through a time that does parallel historically. I don't want to sound like I'm
no,
but
it's true, and this
yeah,
is the thing: is
we're
people keep accusing us of being alarmists,
right,
of overreacting, but it's not the case. Like, this is happening right now in front of our faces. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying it is. It's
right.
happening, and now you work with these people every day who are you are working with the Jews of 1935, 1938 Germany at this point.
Yes,
Like, that is it. And from the inside, you have no hope to offer. No, I shouldn't say have no hope to offer. You have no reassurances to offer that this is any different than the way that we're perceiving it. It is not any better. There is not that transparency from the inside perspective, from the legal perspective. This is very horrifying stuff, and people need to take it seriously. I mean, they
right.
need to look no further than a history book of the 1930s and 40s to see where we are at currently.
Right. The
And
actions that are being taken by this government are the actions of fascist governments. And as much as I'm sorry I didn't bring hope, but maybe more awareness, because that is what we need. We need people to know what is really going on because they need to be outraged. We're not going to see a change until people recognize what's going on as not democratic, not American. And we need people to respond to that.
do. Well, I think one of the things that really gets people to get that emotional, visceral response that I think they need right now is, won't somebody think of the children? We hear it every time a drag queen reads a book to a child, and that's that's where
Or
we're
goes
at.
to a
Like,
single
well,
health class, and learns
yeah.
about their physiology, and biology.
So if we're horrified about kids having books read to them by somebody who has better style than most of us, I think that we're going to be really horrified when we hear about what real live human children are doing in not imaginary situations that these people have made up to be mad about. Now they have a real situation to be mad about where children are getting abducted and trafficked, and this is what you do every day is try to protect these kids, try to represent these kids, try to give them the best chance possible. And can you just tell us what is going on specifically with children in America that are being subject to these authoritarian fascist policies? Yeah, what is happening there
Yeah.
with them specifically?
So we'll start real broad. First of all, when you deny legal representation or the opportunity to have representation to children, you're now sending kids to court who are ranging from age to pre-verbal all the way to the age of 18 with no guidance. So there is no way that they can do any, help themselves in court. They're all going to be deported. Okay, they're all going to be sent back. And we don't know where they're going to be sent back to. During the first Trump administration, if you were from Guatemala, they might take you back to Guatemala, but not necessarily to your family. They would just drop you off. Nowadays, we don't even know if they're going to go back to their home country. So you've got that. Just broadly speaking, you take away representation, you take away from unaccompanied children, you're going to have very, very young children in court and in a judicial system that has to deal with that. Also, you are picking up parents, you're picking up breadwinners. You now are going to put kids in poverty. You're going to put them back into government custody because they're not going to have a caretaker anymore. We are seeing a lot of that where their sponsors, their parents, whoever their caregivers are being picked up and the kids are just left. They don't even necessarily, they may come home from school and not have someone home. And there's no follow through with that. There used to always be, I've talked to officers who would go to homes, and that was always one of the first things that they would do is first make sure that they knew who was in the family unit and made sure that minors were cared for if they were going to pick up the caregivers. And there's none of that anymore. So that's happening on a broad scale. I have seen photos of children going to immigration court and being zip tied while their parents are handcuffed, be put in detention. And then, as we previously spoken about, where they end up, we're not entirely sure. So those are things that are happening routinely.
Do you have again? We've all heard it, and I appreciate the overarching explanation of what's happening, but like you've personally experienced and dealt with this, right? Like, can you give us real examples? Like, what have you seen and had to deal with these children? Like, I want a walkthrough of what happens when a 5-year-old is put in front of a judge. Like, what is all of that looking like? we want to be in the courtroom with you and see what that's like, what
Mhm.
that's like.
Um, it's going to depend upon your judge. Some judges are very sympathetic to having children in their courtroom and are trying really, really hard to tell them. And understand too that for the most part, it's not, the way that the system is supposed to work, it is not a one and done where you go to court and it's either, okay, you are here or not. In the past, if you were a child, you came alone, the judge would grant continuances to allow you to find counsel, to have an attorney. If you were detained, you received an attorney. So any child who was in a shelter had an attorney. That is not happening. And when a child is in ORR custody, in government custody, and they don't have an attorney, I do not know personally of any cases where those children were deported, but they are getting issued removal orders, and the next step is deportation. But I also have lost a lot of contact because Trump has closed down shelters. We don't have the number of kids coming that we did. We do, so they're not being placed in shelters. They're being closed down, and then of course, attorneys aren't able to represent kids in many cases. That it's been spotty when sometimes the contract's on, sometimes it's off, kind of thing. So personally, I do not know of children of my own of clients or in my group that where they have been deported, but I have seen in court children who don't have an attorney and judges trying to communicate with them about what that's about. I have seen children with parents where they've said, the judges basically said, do you want me to deport you today or do you want voluntary departure? Because voluntary departure is a legal relief where a person can say, yes, I voluntarily will leave. They have anywhere between 60 and 120 days to leave. So I've seen more of that. But it's early. These things are changing very rapidly, and judges are keeping up with it. So I think it's going to take some time before the judges that I've worked with, and certainly it depends upon your jurisdiction because but the cases that I've seen are all before juvenile judges who are trained to be working with children or should be trained. But I know in other jurisdictions, there isn't a lot of compassion, and it is, hey, I'm ordering you removed today. And yes, if there's an ICE officer waiting outside, particularly for any child that's been reunified with a parent, that they would be picked up and put in detention immediately and potentially deported in a short period of time.
I just don't understand how any country, I was going to say a developed nation, the richest country in the world, but any country, I couldn't imagine, the poorest tribe in the most underdeveloped country in Africa doing something where they expect a child to represent themselves in some sort of legal matter of consequence, of any consequence, let alone this much consequence, and the fact that they're put in front of a judge by themselves in zip ties or handcuffs is it's disgusting. And just it seems like it has to violate some sort of international law. I mean, there's
Immigration law is crazy. It's administrative law, but it mirrors our criminal justice system without giving the respondents the same rights that you would give a defendant. So it is, it's a very different area of law than we see anywhere else. I've even had an immigration judge who was not accustomed to unaccompanied minors saying, I don't understand who's the child's guardian. He said, the child doesn't have a guardian. They're here in the government. He's like, that's impossible. There's no court in America that would let a child not have a guardian in court. And I had to pretty much write a brief to him about what it means to be an unaccompanied child in our American immigration system, and the way we treat minors. It doesn't matter what your age is. You are the respondent, and there is no provision for finding a guardian. There are certain protections that are given in unaccompanied children, and that might be why when you say walk me through this and see what's happening to these children, there are still protections specifically for unaccompanied children that would end up in delaying their deportation, but not necessarily preventing it.
And then I still cannot wrap my head around this. And then this 5-year-old child gets deported because obviously they can't represent themselves because they're a toddler. We don't know what happens to them. We don't know who they go to in wherever they get deported to. Like we don't know any of that. Like,
correct. Under the first Trump administration, there's a form of relief that is only available to children. It's called a special immigrant juvenile visa. A child can apply for this type of relief, be approved. Our government says, yes, you cannot be returned because we recognize that there is nobody who can safely care for you. You've been abused, abandoned, or neglected. So have that approved. But because there isn't a visa available, they have to wait for that visa. In the meantime, during the first Trump administration, they were ordering these children removed, even though our government has already determined that they're eligible to stay here. They have a pathway to citizenship, but we're going to remove them because it's going to take too long for you to get there. And so they had removal orders, and kids could just be sent back to their country. And like you said, one of our jobs as a working in immigration was we would find organizations in their home country that would help repatriate and ensure that that there was somebody to receive the child, that the child would be coming to a city where the family could get there eventually, or even be notified that the child would be coming. Now, most of my immigration work was under the Biden administration, where even when we had children who wanted repatriation, wanted voluntary departure, there was a plan in place. Our government worked with making sure that when that child was returned, they were returned safely. During the first Trump administration, that did not always occur, and I'm waiting to hear more about how deportation or even voluntary departure of immigrant children how that is taking place.
Did you work with it's because I think you said you were in Texas during Trump's initial administration. Did you work with any of the families that had been separated, or were you around any are you working with any organizations dealing with that at the time?
We did. I unfortunately am not a Spanish speaker, so I was not hands on the ground at the border and trying to help locate children and work with families who had been separated. So it wasn't a personal experience of mine, but certainly I had a lot of colleagues who were helping with that. That was, I feel like during that first Trump administration, the policy was keeping people out, and there was a lot more work on the border, building the wall, separating families once they entered, whereas this administration's policy is more let's send out the people who are already here. But yeah, that whole separating families, putting kids in cages, and quite frankly, losing kids. There was no recording. It was simply separating kids or families, and there was no way of tracking that. And to this day, there are still hundreds of kids that were separated and never reunified with their family.
Insane. It's one of those things that makes you just ashamed of your country as a whole. This is something so fundamental. You'd think that anybody, it doesn't matter who you vote for, what political beliefs you have, what ideologies you have, what religious beliefs. You have like making sure that families are kept together, and kids are not being taken advantage of, or being abandoned, is just like a basic human right that you think that we would be focusing on giving just the bare minimum to. And the fact that not every single person in this country is outraged to the point of storming their representatives' offices and demanding that they fix this is it's hard. And I don't even like kids, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like I I can't, I just cannot wrap my head around it. Like, these are the most vulnerable people in our society, and especially the what about the children
Yeah.
people are the ones who are not only turning a blind eye, but actively supporting this, actively championing this. They're the people who voted this in and are making excuses for it. And I don't have, it's not often that I don't have the words for something, and I just do not have the words to describe how I feel about this, how physically ill it makes me feel to think about what these kids are going through, and the fact that we're all a part of a society that is doing that, you know?
And these are children who have already been through unspeakable things. Um, and now to know that you know, our government, the people they're supposed to trust. I mean, and that's what's really very really hurtful when I think about these are children that I've worked with who at one time were afraid to leave their house because of the dangers of gangs or other violent perpetrators, and they have now come here and they're afraid to leave their house because of our
Because of the
government.
danger of gangs,
Yeah,
just state
right,
sanctioned gangs. Like,
right.
this is,
Yeah.
yeah, there's not a lot that hits me super emotionally, but it is, I can't wrap my head around it. I cannot grasp it and think of the words to say, just put into perspective how insane this is, how messed up this is, how horrible.
I actually, it just kind of occurred to me. I drove up to northern Minnesota this weekend and passed by 1.5 million, anti-abortion signs, and this parallel just kind of occurred to me is the people who make those signs, um, that are so concerned about children's welfare are the same people that voted for this.
Yeah.
And I call people who are anti-abortion pro-lifer, or no, not yeah, pro. I call them pro-birthers specifically for that
Right.
reason,
Call
not
them
because they're not
anti-choice.
pro-life, they're pro-birth, and they are they're not for children, they're for, I don't know what they're for in this situation. I can't see any benefit to the immigration practices that we're seeing. So there's not even a equivalent parallel to a pro-birther in this situation.
Yeah. You're spot on. I mean, the hypocrisy is does not go unnoticed.
Well,
Well,
for some people, unfortunately, it does.
um, hey, I really do appreciate you, everything you do. The fact that you are doing this, I mean, this is incredibly thankless work. I would say probably in the best of times, and has to be almost torture now, in the current situations that we're in. And it's it's a selfless thing. There's a lot more lucrative things I'm sure a lawyer could be doing with their skills and degree. And the fact that you've taken up, both you and your husband, your husband is working with the local state party, and trying to make a difference there, and you guys are showing kind of some of the best that our country has to offer in the midst of some of the worst that our country has ever been. And I want to say just genuinely thank you for being there, and standing up for Americans, whether they're from here or not, for people in our community, for the most vulnerable in our community. for the Constitution. Thank you for standing up for that when the people who are supposed to defend that we elect are doing the opposite, forcing you to do the work that you're doing. And thank you so much for coming and taking the time to talk to us and explain to hopefully some people how horrifying this is and how seriously this needs to be taken. Somebody with the authority to speak on it and not just somebody who yells into his phone in the pasture.
I really, really appreciate that. And thank you for having me on your show. The only thing that I did want to say is that the work that I do is hard, but it's also extremely, extremely rewarding. The people that I've worked with. And also just, you know, 9 years ago, I was just home raising my kids, which I love doing. But I started volunteering and I ended up doing this work. And I know I have made a difference in so many lives. And I just want to send that message out to other people that even though this problem is huge, I don't know how to fix it. Getting involved and making a difference, even to, a handful of people, it still does make a difference. It makes a big change. I started, like I said, as a volunteer at this program. I ended up starting a program or becoming the first attorney to start an unaccompanied children's program. We grew that office. We grew it actually nationwide within this nonprofit. So I just want to kind of send that message. You never know where your path is going to take you, and that you really can make a difference in a lot of people's lives.
That is truly, truly incredible, and it's amazing. I didn't realize you were the first attorney to do that, to start this program. And
At the particular nonprofit, not
okay,
just at the
okay.
nonprofit that I worked at.
But even so, to be the first person at that nonprofit to start that, and then for it to grow into what it's become is it truly is like everybody can make a difference, and you never know what kind of difference you're going to make, but you have to get involved in something, anything, and there's nothing too small
Right.
to get involved in. Just do something, whether that's just showing up to a protest or calling your reps. Call your damn reps right now and tell them to knock this shit off, and email them, like annoy the hell out of them.
Right.
It's make them feel as uncomfortable as they're making us feel right now. And yeah, and if you can do more, if you have um a certain special set of skills, as Liam Neeson would say, to do things like represent people legally and whatnot. Anything you can do, to get involved. This is going to take a nationwide effort of citizens to solve these problems, and we need to do it soon. So, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. It truly is incredible. Is there any way that people can help support you or the cause as a whole? Like, what can they do specifically, financially, volunteer wise? What can they do to get involved and on this specific issue or help the causes that you're working?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there are various nonprofits out there that, if you were just to Google who's doing resettlement work, unaccompanied minors work, for financial donations. Honestly, the biggest thing that people can do right now is just talk to your neighbors, talk to people about who immigrants really are, the contributions that they give to our communities, the fact that they are not criminals, just changing people's understanding and perception of people, and just being truthful of what's really happening. I think will go, is really what we need. But certainly, yes, anybody who can be out there and protesting, or if they can financially give. There are a lot of attorneys who want to do this work and who will lose their funding. Currently, I think the biggest funder in the government's contract ends at the end of September, and I foresee that that's when most children will lose any representation.
All right, guys. Well, please do a little bit of research. I know a lot of these organizations have to be careful about how much information they give out for safety reasons. Obviously, as sadly we've all seen, um, kind of the political violence that people are capable of in our society today. So please stay safe and just go out and again Google these things, find out ways to get involved and support. And thank you as always for supporting our show by listening, by watching. Those of you who subscribe help us keep the lights on, so to speak. And as always, we've got merch at offthewagon.com, both for Lucky Me shows and for my personal Off the Wagon stuff. But we just appreciate all of you guys here, and please share this. This is an incredibly uncomfortable and depressing episode, I know, guys, but it's incredibly important. And please share this and get this word out because this is where we're at, and we need more people to be painfully aware that this is where we're at, and I don't think people are getting it. So, thank you so much to everybody, and
just like and just share this with your Republican grandparents or aunt or mother or parents. Share this with the person that you think cares about people in a way that directly is affecting like their livelihood, their lives, and who would, if you ask them, what do you think about children being forced to represent themselves in court by themselves and then deported to a country potentially to be just dropped off, and if you feel like they would say no, I don't support that, then share them this podcast and or just have them Google unaccompanied minors in immigration court, in court at all. So if that's all you can do, then please do that.
Well, thank you again so much, Kate, for being here and sharing this sad story, and thank you so much again for the work you do. It's incredibly important, and no matter how history goes, you should be remembered kindly for it because you're doing something that is desperately needed, and unfortunately, there's not nearly enough people who are able or willing to do the work that you're doing. So it's incredible to see you doing that.
Yep, and if there's anything we can do to elevate any particular issues or voices in the future, feel free to reach out.
Thank you for sure.
Thank you everybody for watching, and we will see you guys next week.
That's right. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.